Alright, so today I have to make a video on this story here, and basically it was a few days ago from November 13th. I'm not sure if it's like this every day, but at least on November 13th, India's air pollution was so bad that planes couldn't land. So it was basically like fog, like thick fog. And the point of this story is that we hear all the time in the West about how big of an issue climate change is, even though a country like Canada only produces about 1% of the world's greenhouse gases or CO2. And then you have a country like India that produces, I don't know what the number is, but I know between India and China, they produce over half the world's CO2. So if climate change is this big issue and CO2 is the main thing that's driving it, then why aren't we more concerned about India and China's output rather than Canada's when we're only producing 1%? And even if all these climate change initiatives are put through, we maybe drop CO2 emissions by what, 5-10% maybe. I know BC's had a carbon tax for 10 years. CO2 levels are the same, so all the proposals they've put in haven't done anything. 10 years it should be a good enough sample size that if your policies haven't worked after that amount, then I don't see them working. But anyways, we have Justin Trudeau, who, if you follow him on Twitter, he's been talking about climate change and how big of an issue it is, and basically deflecting from all his scandals and how bad the economy is and all that kind of stuff. He's talking about climate change and how bad it is and how they're going to do stuff about it, even though all they've done is implement a carbon tax that just so happens to be a tax on everything, thus raising the cost of living by a pretty good amount. And if you're someone who's living paycheck to paycheck, then you're screwed, or you're gonna have to cut back from something you can't really cut back from. And if you're living comfortably but you're not doing that well, all of a sudden you're living paycheck to paycheck basically. So that's basically what the carbon tax is in Canada. And the point of this video, more or less, being is that I've made videos about this before, and I don't think I'm going to change people's mind on the subject, but basically, this is for the people that are in the middle. A lot of these videos are just preaching to the choir. I understand that, but I do think that there's some people that are either against it or against my position or are in the middle that don't quite understand things. And people that are in the middle and are against my positions tend to be people who have never been exposed, especially people who are against it, or people who are more far left, or even left. Nowadays far left is left. So, but anyways, they tend to never be exposed to these kind of ideas. The one thing that, again, the one of the many things that you can argue between the left and the right, again, for the people that think they're the exact same, I don't think you could be more wrong. But the difference being is that when you're on the right, by default, without you even having to try, you are exposed to ideas that differ from yours all the time. And when you're on the left, that doesn't happen. By default, ideas that agree with you are thrown at you all the time. So if you don't actively go out and try to see views that differ from yours when you're on the left, it's not going to happen. When you're on the right, it's going to happen without you even trying, because the mainstream media overwhelmingly biased to the left, especially in Canada. In the US, you have Fox, but Fox isn't quite as bad as what they're made out to be, and they're not as partisan to the right as someone like CNN or MSNBC. Yeah, they're partisan, but they're not as bad. They weren't wanting to impeach Obama for no apparent reason. They didn't spend 10 times as much time talking about how bad Obama was than they had any prior president in history, like the CNNs and MSNBCs of the world are doing with Trump. So for all the people that disagree with me, that you can't argue that point I just made. So, but anyways, getting back to this point, if climate change is such a big issue, then where are you guys? Like, for the people that agree with this, and for the Justin Trudeau fans and Justin Trudeau of the world, Trudeaus of the world, Greta Thunbergs or Thunbergs, where are you on this? Like, if you actually care about climate change, you would be railing against India and China. Like, you'd spend 99% of your time talking about them, but you don't. And the real reason for that is, I think I mean, probably 90 to 95% of the people who believe in climate change, they're really just useful idiots for socialism, basically. When you see these people's solutions to climate change, it's always more government power. It's always more socialistic policies. Um, One of the architects of the Green New Deal literally said that the Green New Deal was more about implementing socialism than helping the environment. So again, there's no denying this kind of stuff. That kind of stuff isn't my opinion. I do have opinions on the topic, but it's not opinion that um, all these people's solutions to climate change is always more government power. It's always more socialism, and of all the policy positions that have been tried, none of them actually have worked. The solution to this kind of stuff is that if you did believe in climate change, like I say, number one, you literally would not spend 1 minute in Canada or 1 second on Canada worrying about the oil sands or any of this crap. You would spend all your time in India, and not in necessarily in India and China, but worried about India and China, because China is build and India are building coal power plants like they're going out of style. But here, if we want to build one in like the whole country, it's like no, it's the biggest issue in the world. So it's just basically, in a nutshell, this is just pure hypocrisy, and it proves that the people that are advocating for this kind of stuff either have literally no idea what they're talking about whatsoever, like whatsoever, and that is not hyperbole, or they have a more sinister agenda and they're willing to lie to people to get power, and so that they can get their sinister agenda put through. Now, the Justin Trudeau's of the world, it's the sinister agenda. The everyday, probably 95 to 99% of people who believe in climate change and follow Greta Thunberg and all these people, they're just the useful idiots that have no idea what they're talking about. And one of the other reasons too to bring up for this is that whenever you talk to people, and I've talked to a decent amount of people about this, so I know, whenever you talk to people about this kind of stuff, they can never cite tangible, stats or arguments for climate change, aside from the overwhelming majority of scientists agree, which is easily debunked. It's not the overwhelming majority of scientists. I think it is the majority, but number one, there's a massive conflict of interest there, in that if climate scientists all of a sudden came out and said climate change wasn't an issue, well, all of a sudden governments would have no reason to study climate change anymore, thus leaving them out of a job. So there's a pretty clear conflict of interest there. Number two, the study that they're citing when they say that was a survey put out to about 3,000 scientists and geologists, and I don't know what else, other people they put it out to, but I think mostly scientists and geologists. And of those people, to get the whole 97% number, they took about 100 of their opinions. So of the 3,000 people, they took about 100 of those people's answers to get to that. Now, if that's not the definition of cherry picking, I don't know what is. So I think if that's not enough to debunk it, then literally nothing will. But basically, in a nutshell, to sum it up, this is just another example of seems like a million examples that they don't actually care. And like I say, the people in the middle are the ones that really bother me, because they have the power to sway the discussion when it comes to this kind of stuff, because there's the people that don't agree, there's the people that agree, there's the people that are in the middle. And the people that just blindly take the middle and refuse to take a side are the ones that bother me, because like I say, they have the power to sway the public belief in the whole topic. And so that's kind of the person I try to get through with this video and whatnot. But yeah, like basically it just boggles my mind how, number one, people can be this power hungry to try and get their political agenda rammed through, that they're willing to lie to people to this extent. And two, that so many people can be so ignorant and dumb that they can fall for this kind of stuff. Like, if Donald Trump was trying to put through something like this, like, I don't even want to know what the left would do. They're going so crazy over stuff that isn't even his fault and he didn't even do, that it's not even funny. I don't know what they would do if he was trying to do something like this. So I could talk forever on this subject, but basically, to sum it up, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. share everything. I'd appreciate that, and stay tuned for more.